So thank you for joining us again for another question. The question we're looking at today is one allowed to wear a sword outside on Shabbos? And this is in reference to obviously, being in uniform, and some of our folks in the military and dress uniform will wear a sword as part of the dress uniform.
Okay, so this is actually a machlokes tanoim, and when we speak about today, I don't think it's common for people to have swords. People have guns, so it's actually a slightly separate question, and we'll see what that means in just a moment. When the Mishnah speaks about wearing a sword on Shabbos, it says a person cannot go out with a sword or a bow or a shield or any of these things, a club on Shabbos. And if the person does, chayiv chatos, they've carried and violated a biblical prohibition. Clearly, the concern of the Mishnah was not what our initial reaction would be today, a muktzah issue. These things are muktzah on Shabbos, they cannot be handled because of their utility. Rather, the concern of the Mishnah was the issue of carrying on Shabbos. And whether this is, we're not allowed to just carry things on Shabbos. If it's a garment, you're allowed to wear it, but this is clearly not a garment. So if it's not a garment, so therefore it's called carrying on Shabbos. The Rebbe Eliezer in the Mishnah, he argues and he says, that these things are considered ornamental. And just like a woman or a man is allowed to wear certain ornaments on Shabbos, sometimes there's a gzeira of the chachamim that you can't, depending on the specific circumstances. Maybe a woman might take it off and show it to her friends, but a man is allowed to wear what's considered to be male jewelry on Shabbos. Today, women are lenient, and that's a separate discussion. If you want, we can get into that, why today women do wear jewelry on Shabbos. But the Rebbe Eliezer says, for a man, the weapon is considered to be ornamental, and therefore it's not carrying, and one is allowed to wear an ornament on Shabbos. To which the Chachamim responded that if they were so ornamental, then in the times of Mashiach, why does it say in Yeshaya that we're going to transform the swords into plowshares, etc., if they're ornaments? Clearly, there's something negative, and when Mashiach comes, we'll be rid of them forever. May that be speedily. And we do not consider it to be an ornament. Now, there are psukim in Tehillim which support Rebbe Eliezer, where it says, for example, gird yourself with your sword, your glory and your splendor. So there, clearly, the sword is meant to be ornamental. The Chachamim understand that pasuk to mean it's a metaphor for make sure you always have your Torah clear, and you can always have your answers and your thoughts well prepared instead of having to fumble around. And Rebbe Eliezer says, yeah, but the pasuk means what it means literally. It means that a sword is an ornament. But the Chachamim argue. So that's the first issue, whether it's considered to be an ornament or not, and it's not. Because of that, from a carrying standpoint, one cannot wear weapons on Shabbos. But obviously, that only applies in a place that you're not allowed to carry. Today, in most Jewish cities, or most cities where you have an Orthodox community, you have an Eruv. So the whole discussion over here of the Mishnah is simply irrelevant because we're allowed to carry whatever we want. It doesn't have to be an ornament to allow us to carry it. So then you're left with the next question is it muktzah or not? Is a sword considered to be muktzah, or in our case, is a rifle or a pistol considered to be muktzah? And it's an open question because the way it operates, the way a gun operates is certainly forbidden. Meaning there's fire involved, and it's certainly forbidden to fire a gun on Shabbos. Anything which is, its operation is forbidden, which is called a klisha malachta le'isser, a utensil whose utility, meaning the normal usage of it requires one to violate a prohibition, is muktzah. Now, even though it's muktzah, depending on what type of utensil it is, you could use it for certain things. So, for example, you have a hammer. A hammer is meant for building, klisha malachta le'isser. But if you would need your hammer for some permitted usage on Shabbos, to use it for some permitted use, for example, you have a nut that you want to crack, so you want to crack it open with a hammer, you are allowed to do that on Shabbos. Because even though it's muktzah, it's only muktzah to be used in its regular way, or to move it for itself, right? You left your hammer in the yard, you're worried it might get stolen, so you want to bring it in, that you're not allowed to do. But if you're moving it because you need its place, or you're moving it because you need to actually use it for some permitted use, that's fine. However, that's only if it's a klisha malachta, it's a utensil whose primary function is forbidden, then one is not concerned about using it for other things. I have no problem using my hammer to open a nut. When it comes to things that we are concerned about, and the example in halacha is a moil and his knife, or shochet and his knife, he doesn't want a regular person using it. It's a very expensive knife. You want to cut open your challah, he's not going to want you to do that. Even if for whatever reason on this particular Shabbos, he would say, you know what, it's fine. We say no, it's muksa machmas chisar and kiss. Not only is it a forbidden usage, but the person is particular about it, and then you're not allowed to move it for any reason, even if you need to use it for permitted usage. My assumption is that a gun falls into that category. We're not going to use our gun to crack open nuts or for other things that might be permitted. We hope that we have responsible gun owners. You use them solely and only the way they're meant to be used and not for anything else. You're not going to use your gun as a paperweight or or to stir your coffee. Okay, so it's a klisha malachta le'isser. The only question is, and here is where you have some discussion and some debate about it. What is the main function of the gun? Is it to fire the gun or to be seen as a threat? Now, if it's to be seen as a threat, so it's not isser. There's no isser to wave a gun. The isser is to fire the gun. And if the main function of a gun is to just, so people should know I have a gun and they should stay away from me, they should be afraid. So then maybe the gun is not muktzah. But if the main element of the gun is that it's meant to be fired, and I think that is correct, then it would be muktzah. I would just add the following. And I have a brother who's someone involved in security, and he's told me that they say in security, if you pull your gun, it means you should be firing your gun. Meaning you don't just pull it unless you intend to discharge it, right? You don't just brandish weapons. So it's not just meant as a scare tactic. It's meant to be used. However, an argument can be made that when is a gun meant to be used, depending on the person's gun or the nature of the people. Some people use their gun for hunting, whatever it might be. But if all people are only using their gun for security, so that would also be a permitted usage. Meaning if every time I fired my gun, it was in order to protect myself or my community, so that's allowed on Shabbos. That's not per se a forbidden act. With all of that, where does it leave us? My personal view on this is that a gun should be viewed in a general sense as muktzah, and therefore not handled on Shabbos, unless there is a specific need. If there is a specific need, a person's in a community, not a very safe community, or they're carrying in the shul for protection for the shul, meaning it's security for a community. In that case, as we're dealing with a muktzah issue, and there's a good argument to be made that the function of a gun is permitted to use as protection, so then I would say to that person that they can handle it on Shabbos. Obviously, when we're not dealing with any of the other issues, if we're dealing with a place that has no eruv, especially if it's a question whether it's a real Rishus Harabim, so then we're dealing with the issue besides for muktzah. But today, generally, you have an eruv, or in most cities, even if you don't, the prohibition against carrying is Carmelis, it's a rabbinic prohibition. Just like I'm willing to be somewhat lenient in the muktzah issue, I'd be somewhat willing to be lenient over there as well. Although for that, I would advise the person, if you're carrying it for a shul, to get a safe in the shul instead of carrying it to shul and taking it out of the safe when you get to shul.
So going back to the ceremonial question environment, so let's say there happens to be a graduation ceremony or something that comes out on Shabbos, and you're expected to be in full dress uniform with your sword or with your gun. We're going with the idea that you're on a base, so we're going to go with the assumption there is an eruv. And your thoughts? So
the sword I would be comfortable with, the gun I would not be comfortable with. And the sword I would be comfortable with because I don't think people are that particular with the sword. I don't think the sword is per se muktzah. You'd use it for all sorts of things, not just to kill people. You'd use it for other things as well.
Baharaya, that oftentimes in the ceremonial events where there's a large cake, someone pulls out the sword to ceremonially cut.
There you have it. The gun over here, it's probably even stricter because clearly the gun, its usage, and they'll fire into the air, and that's the normal usage in that particular case. Sometimes a celebratory shot, and there it's not for security, and clearly that would be a forbidden act on Shabbos, making the gun in this case clearly a klisha malachta le'isser, and therefore it would be muktzah. Now, in the specifics of the case, in what cases can a person be lenient with muktzah, handle it indirectly, not carry it in a regular way because of maybe parnasa or for some other reason? So that would be a separate, an independent question, which would require a full understanding of this, of the importance of this person to wear this uniform, to wear this gun, etc. But from a straight up muktzah question, my answer would be it would be muktzah to use the gun.
So certainly, as in any circumstance, if someone actually comes up with a situation and they need to ask a halachic shaila in that particular situation for that particular person, because it could be different.
So again, there could be a specific case where, when it comes to Shabbos, sometimes we're even willing to allow a person to be over Nisudei Raisu. It's like on its nefashos. There are certain times if a person is going to the bathroom, Chazal, we're lenient with certain laws of muktzah because of kavod habriyos for the dignity of man. So there could be specific cases we're dealing with the question of muktzah, depending on the circumstance, where it would be okay. But that would very much require a close looking at the specific facts of that case. In a general sense, I would tell a person you should not be wearing your gun to ceremonies on Shabbos.
This has been a wonderful discussion, and I really appreciate your time and expertise and insights. And wishing you all the best. Bye bye.